Thing. Okay, perfect. So that is the full version. Again, thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure that it was looking good and that we're ready to have a great conversation. So we'll get ready to dive in. This is the ABCs of Social Security. As usual, please feel free to chat with us. You can put comments in the chat box. You can ask questions. You can give feedback, and I'll do my best to take some breaks during the presentation, and then also just to make sure that I answer any of the questions that you ask. So again, thank you so much. I have the chat box open over here on the right. I promise, not playing Candy Crush over here, looking at the chat box, but we'll go ahead and get started. Just a quick disclaimer, of course, Innovative Wealth Building is registered in the state of Maryland, specifically Lexington Park. We do work with people across the country, but of course, we only give advice for a fee in places where we're approved. The short answer is we can work across the whole country, so that doesn't really matter. The presentation here today is meant to be educational. We're not selling anything. We're not offering anything in particular. The most important thing to us is giving some content and some information to help you be more informed as you plan for your financial goals. Of course, with any investments we talk about directly or indirectly, all investments do have risk. So just keep in mind that no performance is promised unless it specifically says guaranteed. And if we do use client examples, just know that these are for illustrative purposes. Again, we're not guaranteeing or warranting that anything will work out exactly as we say. So that's our disclosures. Our lawyers would be happy for us to go through that slide with you. And for today's presentation, we are recording. The plan was for both myself and Kenna to be presenting today. Unfortunately, Kenna's having a bit of an issue at the moment. She suffers from occasional migraines, and as much as she wanted to be here today, she had one of those migraines just a few minutes before we got started. So today you're stuck with just me. Not quite as cool as Kenna, but I will do the best that I can in order to try to give us a good conversation and to paint the picture. If there's any really tough questions, I'll use my lifelines. I'll call Kenna, Warren, Jennifer. I'll call mom or dad. They're watching as usual, but I think we'll be okay. So we'll make sure that we get started. So we have quite a few things on the agenda. Today's agenda is going to cover quite a bit. We're going to talk about the essentials of Social Security. We're also going to talk about Social Security best practices, some of the pitfalls that we've seen happen occasionally, and we'll wrap it up with talking about how you can integrate Social Security into a retirement plan. And we don't just mean any retirement plan, truly we mean a good, thoughtful retirement plan. So that will be our intent, again, to give you some basics, to talk about best practices, pitfalls, and then to tie it all together at the end to just say, hey, how does this really fit into the picture of your retirement plan? So that's where we're going to start. So we're going to get ready to launch. I'm looking at the chat box. Any comments, questions, thoughts before we get ready to jump in and start with what is Social Security? So I'll pause here for a moment. I have this here with me because I've been running all over the place and just sitting down. So don't mind me if you see me wiping sweat a little bit. I promise it's not that I'm nervous. I just, I have that problem. Blame genetics. It's okay. But it doesn't seem like any questions, so we'll go ahead and get started. So let's talk about what Social Security is. And I don't know that I really thought about this really deeply until I was trying to plan for this presentation. So of course, Social Security is a noun, right? We went to school, we know what a noun is. But if you break the word apart, social, meaning for the population, for us and our neighbors, and security, financial security or stability, that's what it's all about. So the purpose of Social Security is to provide resources and money for all of us. And by all of us, that is referring typically to United States citizens that have a Social Security number and qualify for the Social Security program. Now, there's pros and cons to anything. I would say that Social Security is good because it's a forced savings account. If you don't know this, 6.2% of every dollar you make is probably going to Social Security unless you make above about $140,000. you don't get a choice in if you send that money or not. It's going. So it's forced money that builds up in an account and should provide a lifetime income to you in the future. There are plenty of other benefits, disability, survivorship benefits, but in general, it's a forced saving where money goes into that program and then it pays out later. So when we think about retirement in the context of how it used to be, once upon a time, retirement was really a three-legged stool. You had your Social Security, you had your pension, because many more of us had pensions back then. You work at a job for a while and you get a lifetime paycheck, and then you had your nest egg. And back then, maybe our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents' time frame, they didn't have to rely heavily on their nest egg. With Social Security and their pension, they were probably good to go and able to have a comfortable life. By the way, maybe there weren't as many debts. There weren't college debts as big as now. There weren't credit cards and debt everywhere. But, they had those three things: the nest egg, the pension, and Social Security. Fast forward to today, many less of us have pensions. And I mean pensions in the traditional sense, where you stop working and you keep a paycheck for life. If you work for the government, i.e. military, firefighter sometimes, police officer, if you're a teacher, maybe you have a pension. But if you work at XYZ company in downtown, you may not have a pension whatsoever. So now, instead of this three-legged stool, we're standing on two legs. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel that confident in my ability to balance adequately on a two-legged stool. Not to mention, more so now than ever, the emphasis, that's right, the emphasis is on us to have good decisions with our Social Security, but more so to create that strong nest egg to really support us as we're in retirement. By the way, that emphasis joke, that's courtesy of Hondo Halleck, if you know Hondo. So again, because of the environment we live in for retirement, we've got to get this right. We've got to make the Social Security decision count, and we also need to make sure that our nest egg is strong enough to sustain us and our lifestyle through retirement. So here's a fun activity. If you've never done it before, you probably have. I would encourage you to go to ssa.gov. That's the Social Security website. And when you go on there, you'll see disability, all sorts of benefit programs. And you'll find, if you click the little hyperlink, this type of pop-up, which will show you your projected benefits. And truly, it'll show you some of the basic information we'll talk about today. What I love about it is it's pretty. It's only 2 pages long. It is significantly different than it used to be. Once upon a time, your Social Security statement would show you this bold letter that said, by 2034, we don't have enough money. We can only pay about 78% of promised benefits. You know what? They got rid of that line and they put it in the little subline at the bottom. So if you click on that link that says ssa.gov there for me, it'll tell you in rosy language how they've had tough times before and they figured it out. But it's worth noting that once upon a time on page 1, it said, by the way, we're running out of money, but now that language is gone. So I found that to be a little bit interesting. So again, if you haven't done it, go to ssa.gov. Doesn't matter if you're 25 or 75. 75, you probably already have Social Security. But it's good to go on there. Check your work history, check the amount of credits that you have, look at your disability benefits, all good information to make sure you feel secure about your financial situation. So let's get into it. And we're going to talk about, again, the basics of Social Security. I'm always experimenting with new styles of presenting. So this will be the first time I've done it this way. We'd love your feedback. If this is terrible, feel free after the next couple slides, say, Terry, this is terrible. Go back to the old way. But essentially, we're going to summarize the basics of Social Security into 3 numbers: 40, 35, 40. Again, we're going to summarize it into 40, 35, 40. So first off, in order to qualify for Social Security, you need to have 40 qualifying quarters. How do you get a qualifying quarter? You just have to work full-time somewhere, and that will pretty much do it. There's some minimum earning standard, but in general, if you work 10 years full-time somewhere, you will most likely qualify for 40 quarters. So that's the first part. Work full-time for 10 years, you are vested to receive a Social Security benefit someday. Part 2, 35. Your Social Security benefit is based off of your 35 best years of income. Again, your Social Security benefit is based off of a long computation that includes your best 35 years of income. So Terry, what happens if I have 30 years of income? That means you have 5 years with zeros, and that drags down your benefit formula. So you want to have as many good years as possible. Again, they're looking at the best 35 years. And one of the fun facts is even if you claim Social Security at 66 and you keep working full time, they'll actually go back and take out some of those bad years and put in your newer years, which are highest earnings. So that can actually improve your benefit while you're already receiving it. Here's the third part. Social Security is supposed to provide 40% of the pre-tax earnings for the average American worker. So you do 40 quarters, you get 35 good years, and that's supposed to provide 40% of what you earn now while you're retired. That's what it's supposed to do. If you don't believe me, take a look at the Social Security website, and on SSA.gov, that's what they say. They say it's supposed to provide 40% for the average pre-retirement income for the average worker. Should I hold questions or ask as you go? Feel free to ask your questions. After the next slide, I'm going to take a break and look at questions. So thank you very much. So again, for the average American, it's supposed to provide 40% of their pre-retirement earnings while they're retired. So you might be asking yourself, well, what does the average American look like? What does their income look like? Well, again, by using the Googler and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we found that the average American worker earns about $53,040 per year. So what does that mean? If you make $53,490, the 40% is you. If you make more or less than that number, then you're not getting 40%. Again, that's an average. Just because the average human is 5'6" has nothing to do with how tall you actually are. As your income goes up higher, that 40% gets lower and lower and lower. Think about Warren Buffett. His Social Security is not 40% of the income he makes right now. It's maybe 1%, maybe less, I don't know. So again, keep that in mind. The 40% is for the average person, but all of us are special and unique. I would say none of us are average. So that's the value, but then also the danger of looking at averages. So again, 40, 35, 40. 40 credits to qualify for Social Security. 35 of your best years is what counts in the formula, and it's supposed to provide 40% income for the average American worker. I'll pause here. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm looking at the chat box now to answer any specific questions on what we've talked about so far. Additionally, I'm really self-seeking, so I want a little feedback. How is this 40, 35, 40? Do you think it would have been much better to have like 200 words on the slide, or are you all following me so far with this 40, 35, 40? So feel free if you want to give any comments. I'd appreciate that because we want this to be as good as possible. I'll take a look at the questions. So is the highest earning 35% calculation the same regardless of if you're W-2 or 1099? Yeah, that's great. So the answer is yes. If it's 1099 or if it's W-2, it largely doesn't matter. However, it's your net earnings. So if you're a business owner and you write off a bunch of stuff, then your net earnings is going to be lower. Because if you're a W-2, you're usually not writing off much. So again, it doesn't really matter. It's about your net income, not just what's on the W-2 or just what's on the 1099. Keep in mind, if you're self-employed, you don't pay 7.65% to Medicare and Social Security. You pay double. You get the privilege of paying 15.3% into Medicare and Social Security, known as FICA taxes. The only good side is half is tax deductible, but I have to pay that. That's not that fun. So great question. So glad to hear pictures are going well. The format's okay. The numbers are okay. Okay, great. Again, if you don't want to embarrass me, you can send me private feedback and say, no, Terry, seriously, that was terrible. Let's go back to the old way. And that's what we'll do. So Andrew, thank you for that question. Again, W-2, 1099 doesn't really matter. It's all about your net income after you take off some of those expenses as a business owner. And that's what's going to get you the right answer. So let's move on a little bit and let's talk about FRA. FRA is full retirement age. This is the age of which you receive 100% of your promised benefit. So if you make it to FRA, you get 100% of your promised benefit. Again, supposedly 40% of your retirement income. Now, once upon a time, from 1943 to 1954, full retirement age was 66. And then in 1955, they said, hey, let's change it by 2 months. And then in 1956, they said, hey, let's change it by 2 months. And then the next year, and the next year, and the next year. And then in 1960, they said, you know what? This is too much work. Let's just leave it alone for 60 years. So for 60 years at the Social Security Convention, they sat around and said, nope, 67 sounds good. If you're driving down the road and you take your hands off the wheel for 60 minutes, who knows where you're going to end up? So with Social Security not really changing based off the year people are born for 60 years, maybe that has something to do with why Social Security is not quite as solvent as some of us would want it to be. So again, for most of us, your Social Security full retirement age is somewhere between 66 and 67. Once upon a time, it was 65. That was back in 1935 when the life expectancy was also 65. So you see what we did there? Once upon a time, life expectancy and Social Security were the same. Now you can take it at 62, and we're living a heck of a lot longer than 65 on average. Again, some of the problems with the financial standings of the Social Security problem. I am not against Social Security. Personally, I think it's a good thing. I think it would be very hard for us, on average, to replicate what it gives us on our own. However, there are some limitations, and there are some changes that need to be done. If they ever call me up, I'd be happy to be a part of that decision, but honestly, it's simple math. I think they'll be able to get it figured out whenever they decide they want to. Again, FRA, full retirement age, is when you get 100% of your promised benefit. So simple. You go to the website, it says, hey, at age 67, you get $2,500. But life's about choices, right? We go to McDonald's and we don't have to just take the Big Mac as is. We can say, hey, can I have the Big Mac minus the bun, minus the cheese, minus the lettuce, minus the onions? And it's like, well, what do you want? Well, with Social Security, you don't have that many choices, but you can decide to take it at full retirement age, or you can take it as early as 62 or as late as 70. If you take it at 62, you're looking at a reduction as big as 30% of a loss of your monthly benefit forever. If you wait until 72, you're looking at as big of an increase as about 32%. So again, full retirement age is your 100% benefit. You can take as low as 70% or you can take 132% best case. The choice is completely up to you, but it just depends on when you decide to claim your benefit. Now, there's some other nuances to think about, but for now, it's that simple. You do what they say and you wait until full retirement age, you get 100%. You go on the outskirts, you'll get 70 to 132%. The choice is up to you. So these are real numbers. Think about it. What paycheck do you want for life? $2,500 a month, $3,300 a month, or $1,750 per month? In general, people like me will skew towards encouraging people to wait a bit for retirement. But I do want to take a second to say there are some good reasons to start retirement early. There are some considerations where it makes sense or where it's okay. Mathematically, sometimes there's reasons you may want to delay, but I would encourage you, ask around, talk to people. In my travels and in my experience, I haven't often heard someone say, man, I'm so glad I took it early, but I have heard the opposite. So again, not saying one answer is wrong, one answer is right, but I am saying it's at least worth thinking about and doing a little bit of due diligence. I love this next slide because whenever I talk about taking Social Security at 62 or 70, mom and dad, just kidding. We already discussed this. We're good to go. But seriously, when I do this in person, when I used to do this in person, I could just hear the gears turning in people's heads. They had the abacus out. They were thinking, well, if I take it early, I can invest the difference. And if I invest the difference and it compounds at this interest rate, and I invested in Tesla only on the good days, not the bad days when it loses 30% in one day, then I could come out ahead. I've seen it. I've done it. Here's the bottom line. If you plan to live a long retirement, you probably should wait. If you have a spouse you care about, you probably should wait. If you plan to live past age 81, you probably should wait. I'll unpack that. We've done a lot of analysis. If you take it at 62 versus 66, you take it at 66 versus 70, 62 versus 70, the longest you have to live to mathematically break even is age 81. That's not that far. That's below life expectancy. So if your goal is to maximize wealth over the long term, taking it early may not always be the right answer. Further, if you have a spouse that you care about, I put that there, there are survivorship implications. Your Social Security decision counts twice for yourself and your spouse, especially if you're the higher income earning spouse. You really need to be the one that thinks through on this decision because we all want to live a long retirement, but maybe that won't happen. Last thing I'll say here, people will often say, well, I got to get Social Security while the getting's good. Maybe. They'll say, I don't really plan to live that long in retirement. Maybe. And sometimes there are legitimate health concerns where a person does not plan to live a long time in retirement. Again, beyond that situation, you just want to think about your overall goals. You want to think about your current assets and income and the other people that you care about. Look at all the data points and then make the best decision you can. That's all it comes down to. So truly, again, I just love this picture because it reminds me of our son who's always just thinking of like, what is happening? How's this working? He's like a 20-month-old engineer. It's hilarious. But it's just something that we love to see. And truly, we see this when we're talking about Social Security with folks. So I'll pause here again for a moment. I'm about to get ready to wrap up the Social Security essentials. I'll just invite you, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know, and then we'll carry on. So just a couple more slides here, and then we'll get on to the best practices and pitfalls. So does FRA mean 100% of the 78% that was going to be paid originally? Good question. So 100% is what you get at FRA. That 100% is referring to approximately 40% of your pre-tax earnings while you're working. So if you make 70,000 a year, 40% of that's 28,000 a year. So if you wait until FRA, you get the whole 28,000 per year. Now that 78% earlier, that's how much money Social Security currently has that they're able to pay us if they don't change something. So if they don't change anything, instead of you getting 28,000, which used to be 100%, maybe you're getting 21,000 per year, or 22,000 per year. So I wouldn't think too much about that 78%. They're going to do something to change the program. And spoiler alert, it's probably not going to hurt us that are claiming it. It's going to hurt the workers. Because where does our money go right now? Every month when our team gets paid, we have a line item that says Social Security. So where does that go? That doesn't go into this magical pot that's saving for us for later. It would be nice if it did. It's going to the 70 million Americans that are currently drawing a Social Security check. Same thing for us. So how do they fix Social Security? They delay the age we can take it, or they make people who are workers pay more money in, or they make them wait later, or they lower the cost of living adjustment. Some of those things are going to happen. But I would be very surprised if we saw a 20% decrease in our projected Social Security balances. However, I've been surprised before. So again, great question. 100% is not thinking about that 78% whatsoever. That's thinking about your 40% of your based off your current earnings. Again, that 78% is if they do not make any changes by 2034. Social Security Administration will only have enough money to give us about $8 on every $10 they're supposed to. Great question. All right, so to start to round this out, we'll just say this. Longevity is a real challenge in retirement. The Social Security Administration knows it. This is published on their website, and they say, hey, most of us will live longer than the average retiree. If you're healthy and if you happen to have above average amounts of wealth, you typically live longer than average. 1 out of every 3 65-year-olds will make it to 90. So if 1 out of every 3 will make it to 90, and if someone's married, that means there's a higher than likely chance, it's more yes than no, that one of you is going to make it to 90. And some people are going to make it to 95. Again, we don't want our time frame for retirement to be 80 or 81. Surely we probably need to plan for 90. Sometimes we plan for age 100 because we just want to be very, very sure. And of course, women tend to live longer than men. Ken is not here, but I still won't go into any of my theories on why that is the case. One reason is women don't, in my experience, don't do the dumb stuff that I know I've done. Recently, I've started going to the hospital thanks to Ken scheduling appointments for me, so that's good. but most wealth ends up with women someday. And that, I don't see that changing anytime soon. And that's a good thing because when I do these presentations across the country in person, there's typically more females in the room really learning and taking an interest in their financial situation. I think that's amazing. So again, plan for longevity, plan for a longer life. And truly, the longer you live, the more challenges financially, because there's more stuff you're going to go through. The longer your drive on the highway, the higher the likelihood there's going to be an accident somewhere. Some tire is going to start coming off of an 18-wheeler and be on the road. There's going to be a traffic jam. There's going to be a bad song on the radio. It's just the longer you're doing something, the more opportunities for stuff you don't love to happen. That's just how it is. Now, this is the last slide, and then we're done. Some people will say, you know what? I don't care. I'm taking it at 62, and that's what I'm going to do. Great. Amazing. What I would suggest is if you're going to take it at 62, just make sure you're not going to go back to work, or you're not going to go back to work and make a ton of money. If you take your Social Security before full retirement age, the Social Security Administration doesn't like that. If you take it at 62 and keep working, they'll say, okay, you can make $19,560, but anything you make above that, we're going to take away $1 for every two that you make. So think about that. If you go out, you claim your Social Security, that's about $20,000 a year. You're 63 years old, and you're making $60,000 at work. That's $40,000 beyond the threshold. 40,000 divided by 2 is 20,000. They're going to take 20,000 away from your 20,000 benefit, and you have zero. So you claim your Social Security, you kept working, and you didn't get your Social Security. So again, remind me, why did you claim your Social Security? Most people don't know that. They'll sometimes retire and they'll go, oh crap, I'm making more than $19,560 because I decided to go back to work, or because I became a consultant, or because I became a contractor. And now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do I go to work and earn income and lose my Social Security? Or do I not work for fear of earning income? Or do I find some way to get paid under the table and have to worry about Uncle Sam or the IRS coming after me? I wouldn't want to live with that stress. So I would say, if you're going to claim it at 62, it probably will benefit you to not make more than $19,560 of earned income. Now, as you get closer to full retirement age, they loosen up the reins. They say, hey, your last year, you can make about $52,000. And oh, by the way, if you make more than that, we'll only take $1 for every three. So if you're making $100,000, they'll say, you know what? Again, we're only going to penalize you on $17,000. So if your benefit's $30,000, we'll let you keep $13,000, but we'll take our 17. I don't know about you, but I don't like that math. I don't want to give away $17,000 when I've already given away $100,000 plus from my payroll throughout my 40-year work career. No thanks, no bueno. I'll just not do that. So again, that's the big downside. They set the program up so you can't take it early and then still earn however much income you're earning and kind of double bank those income sources. So the question is the earned income before or after taxes? Great question. That would be before taxes. So we're talking about gross income. Great question. When they finally do retire, their retirement amount is adjusted up for the years they didn't receive all the retirement amount. Not sure of the percentage. Okay, yep. So good point. There was just a comment here saying that when you do retire, there can still be adjustments afterwards for your Social Security benefit. Again, there's a lot of points and places within the formula, and it is pretty cool that even while you're earning your benefits, it could be replenished later, or they can add in some good years of work to take away some of the bad years. So yeah, this program gets a little bit complicated. So thanks, of course, for the questions and for the comments. The point here is there's a lot of moving parts here. And this is typically one of the biggest financial decisions that most people have to make when it comes to the solid financial situation for themselves and their family. So thank you for the comments and the questions. If there's any others, please let me know. This is a good transition point because we've knocked down the biggest part. I promise you, the other slides are much quicker. So that was the Social Security Essentials portion. We'll get ready to talk about best practices, pitfalls, and then Social Security and retirement planning. So again, if there's any comments or questions, let me know. I will probably wait for 10 seconds and then we'll launch back in and we'll try to leave about 10 minutes for questions. So here's a really good question. Does earned income include withdrawals from other forms of retirement income, brokerage accounts, etc.? It doesn't. Earned income is what it sounds like. It's income you earn from some type of active occupation. If you have a military pension, doesn't count. If you have a federal retirement plan, doesn't count. If you're taking it from a TSP, 401k, IRA, doesn't count. If you have a real estate business that you materially participate in and you pay Medicare and Social Security taxes, it counts. So that's how you check. If you're paying FICA taxes, again, Social Security to Medicare, that would count as earned income, and that would count towards the formula for determining how much Social Security you get, but then also how much you might be losing as a penalty if you earn above that threshold amount. Great question. Very, very great question. All right, so we'll get ready to roll along. Again, we probably have 10, 15 minutes. We'll leave 10 minutes for questions, but if you have questions now, let me know and I'll continue to look over there, but thank you again for the questions. So let's talk best practices. We're going to cover three main things: spousal benefits, survivorship, and the taxation of your Social Security. So here is a question, or here's an important point when it comes to spousal benefits. Some people haven't heard this, but if you're married and you're the spouse who maybe never worked outside the home, or maybe you did for 5 years, but that was it, you still have the ability to have a Social Security benefit. You can have never paid a dollar into Social Security and you can still have a benefit. So again, we have our formulaic calculation. This is like the quadratic formula. If any nerds are out there, I think it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That would be the quadratic formula. Not that complicated, but here we go. So 0. You can have 0 credits and get a spousal benefit. 50. The max spousal benefit is 50% of your spouse's 100% benefit amount. So that's called PIA, primary insurance amount. Just think of it as the 100% full retirement age Social Security benefit they would receive. So you can get 50% of that. Now, if the marriage doesn't last forever, that's okay. If you've been married for at least 10 years, even if you're divorced, you can still make a claim based off of that person's Social Security. What are the ramifications? You can't get remarried. If you get remarried, you then would claim your Social Security based off of your new spouse. But if you never got remarried and you were married to that person for 10 years, again, you can get up to 50% of their benefit when you're full retirement age. Important disclosure, you have a choice. You can take your own Social Security benefit or half of theirs, whichever is higher. Again, you can take your own Social Security or half of theirs, again, 50%, whichever is higher. I put age 60 on there. In the event of survivorship, if you were married for 10 years and you get remarried after age 60, then you can still claim the survivor spousal benefit. That is possible. And the last thing is 32.5. You get 50% of your spouse's benefit if you wait until your full retirement age, which again is 66 to 67. If you take it early, there's a reduction to where if it's at 62, you only get 32.5% of their primary amount. The computation is technically 25/36% for every month that you take it too early. They apply that reduction to the primary amount, and then they take 50%, and then that's how it becomes 32.5. Again, the math and how they do it is a little bit funky, but the bottom line is this: without ever paying into Social Security, a spouse can get up to 50% of their spouse's primary amount for Social Security if they wait until 66 or 67, or it can be as low as 32.5% if they take it at 62. That's how the program works. And again, you'll take your own benefit or half of your spouse's. Age 60, that is if you have a spouse that you're married to who passes away and you wait until at least 60 to get remarried, you could still claim a spousal survivor benefit. If you get divorced and then remarried, the age 60 doesn't matter. But if your spouse passes away, then you can get remarried and still claim a benefit based off someone else, but it has to be after age 60. Again, some of the crazy nuances of Social Security. For a public program that isn't taught in school, it's a little bit complicated. So great question. That's the spousal benefit. That's the bottom line. Great benefit to know about. Um, and it's quite helpful. Well, think about survivorship now. I go to Google and I look for images, and when I put in Survivor, almost every image was for the Goofy TV show. Like there wasn't an actual benefit or an actual image for Survivor that made sense. So I ended up with a cardboard box that looks, pretty sad. So that's the story behind this image. So there was a question: if the spouse has not worked and receives a percent of the working spouse's benefit, is the working spouse's benefit reduced? Great question. No, the working spouse's benefit is not reduced. What the spouse gets has no impact whatsoever on what the other person gets. In fact, if a person married three different people for 10 years each, all three of them could claim their spousal benefit as a divorced person, and it still doesn't reduce away from the other earner or the other earner's new spouse if they get married for a fourth time. So again, it's interesting. And this is some of the reasons why Social Security may not have such a strong standing. We're giving benefits sometimes that don't reduce somebody else's, but also for people that may not have personally paid in because of some of these nuances. I think the divorce rate's probably different now than it used to be. So great question. A spousal benefit does not reduce the benefit for the other person who would be considered the primary earner. Great question. So survivorship. In survivorship, there's a lot of complicated things. I'll just summarize it as this. There's a lot of gray, and it depends on the survivor's age and the age of their spouse when survivorship happens. If they have children under 16, completely different than if all the children are 18 or older. If someone's spouse passes, and let's say they're 45 and no children under 18, that spouse doesn't get any survivorship benefit until 60. But let's say again, they're 45 and they have a 3-year-old. They get a spousal survivor benefit and the child gets a child benefit for, 15 plus years. So there's a lot of nuances to how Social Security works in survivorship. Depends on age, depends on children. It gets kind of complicated. And here's the bottom line. You have to know how the rules work at different life stages. But then when you're faced with choices, you can take the survivorship benefit and keep it forever. You can take your benefit and then shift to the survivor benefit later. You can take the survivor benefit and then shift to your own benefit later. There's all sorts of things to think about. The survivor benefit grows from 60 to 66 or 67, but then it stops. Your personal benefit grows from 62 all the way to 70. So there's all these choices and all these pieces to the puzzle. Who knows how to put it together? Probably not many people. So it's important to have some knowledge beforehand just to, kind of know what might happen. But if you're ever in a survivorship situation, I would just encourage you or anyone, don't try to figure it out alone. Talk to a qualified professional because the decisions you make and the road you choose to walk down is going to have a big impact for your ability to continue to live and be financially secure. We'll talk about taxation of Social Security. This is our last best practice. Social Security is based off of your provisional income. So again, the taxation of your Social Security is based off of provisional income. What is provisional income? Think about it almost like your gross income. They're looking at all the income that you make that's taxable. However, they're only going to count half of your Social Security, and they're going to add back in tax-free things like municipal bond interest. So here's the bottom line. Depending on your marital status, single, head of household, or married filing jointly, your Social Security is taxed either at 0%, 50%, or 85%. Again, your Social Security can be 0% taxable or it can be 85% taxable. If you could choose, would you want your Social Security to be 0% taxable or 85% taxable? I'll just leave that question there and see if there's any thoughts or opinions. I'm guessing 0% would be cool, right? Pay no taxes on Social Security for life, which probably has hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million worth of benefit. Well, it's possible. My family is on track to have 0% of our Social Security taxable. How is that? Because again, they only count half of your Social Security And then if you take money from your Roth account, that doesn't count. There's other places you can take money from that doesn't count. So here's the magic, and here's the reason why some people, many people, should probably think about Roth conversions or having some tax-free Roth assets, because you get to choose what percentage of your Social Security is taxable. Again, it can be 0, 50%, 85% is taxable. Personally, I kind of like the idea of 0%. And depending on your stage of life and your situation, you can impact this. Maybe for the first 5 years of Social Security, you'll do a distribution strategy where you pay 0 taxes for 5 years and then you pay taxes. That probably sounds better than paying taxes forever on your Social Security. So this is some of the gamesmanship you can really start to think about and play with so that you can get into the nuances of how do you make your money stretch as far as you can. Now, for some people, it doesn't matter. If you have a pension, you might be out of luck. If you file married and filing separate, for certain rules, that doesn't work well in retirement. So that's why it's not even on the chart. So again, just something to know. Your taxability of your Social Security, somewhere from 0 to 85%. Up to you to decide how that looks. And that's based off of the spread of your assets. Are they taxable? Are they tax deferred? Are they tax free? That is what's going to help you in retirement. Yep. Could I please repeat? Yep. So if you're married and you can get your provisional income below $32,000, then your Social Security is taxed at 0%. How do you get your provisional income at 0% tax bracket? You probably don't have any pensions. They only claim or count half of both of your Social Securities. And then beyond that, any distributions from your assets need to be Roth, or it needs to be items, sometimes mutual funds that have a high cost basis, which means a low amount of taxability. So there's a lot that goes into this. Some clients have capital gains every year. Capital gains count. So if you're in a situation where you can get 0% taxation on your Social Security, maybe you put your investments into an investment-based annuity that has very low fees, has no lockup period, but it allows your growth to be tax deferred and tax free. So again, your Social Security can be taxed at 0. This is like the level 4 or level 500 course in school, taking it from the simple to the complex, but doing it according to the tax laws to make your money stretch a little bit further. So I know that this point is a little bit complicated, but appreciate the question, and it's interesting. So there's a lot of strategies and things that have come up. So yes, this is being recorded. If you have my email or the email from your team at teamiwb.com, just send us a note and say, hey, please send me the email and I will be happy, the recording, and I'll be happy to send the recording to you. Carmen, you're very welcome. Thank you for the question. Let's hit a couple pitfalls. Short pitfall is this: underestimating longevity. Your Social Security decision, maybe it's only a $600 per month difference, but if you compound that per year, that's $7,000, and then for 20 years, that's a $140,000 decision that maybe didn't go the way you wanted it to. So again, we're living longer than ever. Some people are going to live to age 121, according to the actuaries who make the life insurance policies. So really think about that. And again, think about survivorship. Pitfall number 2, not planning for the probable. What I mean by that is Social Security is most likely going to be there for us. It would be criminal for it not to be. We're paying into it. However, keep in mind that something's got to give. They've got to give us less, or they've got to make us wait longer, or they've got to charge current earners more. Something's got to change. So just be aware that something will change. And when we help people do retirement planning, we don't consider their full promised expected benefit. We'll discount it a bit so that we're a little bit safer. So plan for the probable. Something's going to change. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but we can read the writing on the wall. If gas goes up to $20 a gallon, I would suggest that some of us are probably going to stop driving our Ford F-350. Not because something's wrong with it, but because, that's, like $400 to fill up your car. I'm not going to stay on that topic. Just wanted to say, we know something's going to happen. We don't know what it is. Here's one thing that could happen that could impact us, and that's cola. Now, I'm sure some of you like Coca-Cola, some of you like Pepsi. I'm not talking that cola. I'm talking about cost of living adjustments. If you haven't dug into the Social Security website, you probably haven't seen the cost of living adjustments over the past decade. So can anybody guess, like when you just think about the economy, what's the average inflation that most people say we experience? Does anybody know? Like if you talk to a person like myself, or you talk to an economist, what is the inflation rate that we say that we see out there? Or what's the cost of living adjustments that we see on average? So I see a 6%. That's closer to recent. I see 7%. 2 to 3. Okay. Keith is looking at the long term. 2 to 3 is honestly closer to where a lot of people say inflation has been. So take a look at the cost of living adjustments for Social Security the last decade. 2010, 2011, 0%. Cost of living adjustments is when your Social Security benefit goes up. So for 2 years, you got 0%. Then 1 year, you got 3.5. And then you got 1.7, 1.5, 1.7, 0, 0.3, 2, 2.8, 1.6, 1.3. So you're retired, and theoretically, according to the Social Security website, their benefits increase with inflation to help you manage and keep up with your purchasing power. I call shenanigans because the cost of living adjustments do not keep up with inflation. They certainly do not. Oh, by the way, the cost of living adjustments the Social Security Administration uses is called CPIU. That's the Consumer Price Index for urban workers. And it could be CPIW, but it's urban workers. What does that mean? They are not looking at the basket of goods and the prices that are relevant to retirees. That would be something that was supposed called the CPIE for elderly. They discount Medicare and medical expenses, which is one of the biggest costs that retirees will have. I don't know if you saw this, but Medicare went up by about 14.5% year over year. So even when we consider the gracious and the big COLA adjustment we just saw for Social Security, 5.9%, that's nothing to laugh at. Medicare just went up 14.5%. So again, if you've heard that Social Security will help you keep up with inflation, yes, it will help. However, I don't feel confident that it truly helps maintain your buying power. I certainly think that if Social Security is aimed towards people that are retired, you should probably consider a basket of goods that is relevant to the population. Don't tell me about urban workers when we're taking care of people that are retired. That's Terry's soapbox. Now officially stepping off the soapbox, but just wanted to call that out to your attention. That's one of our pitfalls, not understanding how all this stuff works. So here's my big finish. And I always say how long I'll talk, and I talk too long. I don't even know why I wear a watch. Social Security and retirement planning. You want to think of Social Security as an asset. It is an income source, but if you didn't have Social Security, you would need some pot of money in order to give you that guaranteed lifetime stream. So Social Security is effectively a single premium immediate annuity. It could also be considered a DIA, a deferred income annuity. Remember, you're paying money every single month you get paid into Social Security, and then at some age you start receiving a lifetime benefit. If you disappear, that benefit goes away. So it's like an annuity, and annuities aren't subject to market risk. They pay you a set amount forever and ever and ever. Remember, Social Security allows you to have some cost of living adjustments. So if you're thinking of two people, one's single, one's married, two couples, they both have $1 million. The married couple can actually afford to take a little bit more investment risk because they have an extra pension compared to the single person. A pension or Social Security is like a safe investment. It's like a bond that gives you really good returns with no market fluctuations. So again, when you're thinking about Social Security, think about it as an asset and recognize the fact that Social Security or a pension, if you didn't have it, you'd need several hundreds of thousands of dollars extra in your portfolio to replace those income streams. SWR, that's sustainable withdrawal rate. Generally speaking, people say you need maybe a 3 or 4% withdrawal rate in order to make that income last forever. So just by comparison, if you have a $3,000 per month Social Security, you would need a lump sum of maybe $900,000 in order to help produce that for you forever. So when people say, oh, Social Security is terrible, I get $2,500 a month. Well, if you didn't have that Social Security, do you feel confident you would have saved that extra $750,000 yourself? If the answer is yes, maybe you could have done better than Social Security. If the answer is no, maybe Social Security is not that bad. Again, that's why I say I'm a proponent for Social Security. I just recognize that some changes need to be made. Lastly, I would say with retirement planning, look at the numbers. Numbers don't lie. I recently did this with a family. We looked at their retirement picture if they both live forever, and then we looked at the retirement picture if one person has a short retirement. That's the way that I would make my decision for claiming Social Security. There's no value in you both claiming it at 62 if that looks great if you both live forever, but if one of you passed away at 65 and the other person runs out of money, that's not such a good idea. Remember, the age you claim Social Security impacts your spouse because when you're both living, you have two. When one person goes away, you're left with one. What paycheck do you want to be left with? $1,500 a month or 3,000? What paycheck do you want to leave to someone you care about? 1,500 or 3,000? I would suggest that if you can afford to wait and it doesn't hurt you, at least one of you should wait. Again, we want to plan for the best case, the worst case, because reality is somewhere in the middle. And software can easily help you do that. So I know some of these examples are just towards people that are married. That's because it gets a little bit more complicated. However, if it's your one Social Security you're planning for, I would say that's even more important. You really need to get that decision correct. So again, don't feel like you're on an island. There are resources to help make good decisions. There's breakpoint calculators and simulators really can help you get some good information so you can make an informed decision. Whew, we finished our presentation. I did not leave 10 minutes for questions, but there's 2.5. So we talked about Social Security essentials, best practices, pitfalls, and how to consider Social Security in the context of a retirement plan. Our contact info is on the screen. You can email us at yourteam@teamiwb.com. We have a Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube page where we're hanging these videos. We have an Instagram. Someday we might have a TikTok. We're not there yet. We still want to get Warren dancing on tape. We have our office phone number. Lots of ways to reach out to us if you feel like you want to. We're here to help. So as always, I like to end presentations by saying thank you. Without you all tuning in, I would not have the privilege to be on here and chat with you. Again, Kenna's sorry she wasn't able to make it. Hopefully she's feeling better. I'm going to go check on her and then pick up our little engineer from school. So that's all I have for you today. I'll stick around. If there's any questions, comments, I'll keep an eye on the chat box. But otherwise, I just, again, appreciate you taking the time to think about and plan for your future and learn more about this important government program. So I'll answer questions until they're done. But otherwise, appreciate you. Have a great day, and we'll chat soon.